Okay, so again, hello everyone and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Dylan Kisane. I'm on the marketing team here at Inova. First of all, thanks for taking the time to attend our webinar today. Our webinar today is one in our regular series of events that gather the biopharma community together to exchange and share best practices, industry information, and insights on the digital transformation of our industry. To give you an idea of who's joining us on the call today, we have around 300 people registered coming from all kinds of life science companies, from small biotechs, quite a few top 50 pharma companies, research institutes, some government departments, and as well as attendees from the venture capital sector as well. And now on to today's webinar topic, Biopharma Dealmaking in 2021, Trends and Transformation. My guests on today's webinar are two people perfectly positioned to review the year in biopharma deal making to date. I'll get you to pop your videos on there, gentlemen. First of all, Chris Dokomajilar, who is the founder and CEO of DealForma, where he leads strategy, operations, data analytics, and content development. Prior to founding DealForma, Chris held research management, consulting, and industry analytics roles within biopharma at UCSF, Recap, Deloitte, Thomson Reuters, and BioCentury. He holds degrees from the University of California at Berkeley. His company, DealForma, helps biopharma business development analysts to be better at industry research by providing them clean information and direct analyst support. Business development teams use the DealForma platform to prepare for partnering meetings, research deals, funding trends, technologies, products, and the therapeutic areas that they care about. Gilles Toulemonde is an entrepreneur, innovator, and co-founder and CEO of Inova, right here. An engineer by training, Gilles attended the Mines Tech, where he first fell under the spell of innovation. On graduating in 2001, he set out to apply his knowledge to the growing demand for industrial digital transformation. He launched Inova as a software company that would help tech companies manage their innovation and innovate more quickly. And early clients included leading names in France's automotive, utility, and oil and gas sector, before a pivot to a very singular focus on the life science partnering in 2010. Today, Inova boasts offices in Lyon, the US, and Japan. It serves more than 150 clients in the global pharmaceutical and biotechnology sector, and continues to develop innovative technology and deploy cutting-edge AI to transform life science partnering. And of course, there's myself, Dylan Kisane. I'm on the marketing team at Inova, and I'll be moderating the discussion between Chris and Gilles. And I'll be putting all your questions to them a little bit later on. Now, just before we dive in, a few administrative logistics. Your microphones will be on mute during the presentation so that we can minimize the background noise. We are going to record the webinar. So if you have colleagues that couldn't attend today, or if you want to watch it again later to refresh your memory, we'll send you a link to the recording. If you have any questions during the webinar, please just type them in the chat window and we'll work through them during our Q&A section that will come after the presentations. And then finally, just at the end of the webinar, you'll see pop-up survey come up on your screen to complete, which will help us make sure that we're providing you with the content that you need and give us a chance to understand if you would like to be part of a future webinar and participate along with us as a panelist. And so, with all of that out of the way, we can get down to business, the business of biopharma deal making. I'm going to hand things over to Chris and Gilles, and I believe, Chris, you're going to lead things off. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Gilles, and the folks at Inova. I'm excited to be talking to you today about deal-making trends that we've seen definitely through the first 6 months of this year and a few years leading up to that. We're definitely at a very, very important time of deal making to see how companies are doing coming off of the rush of 2020 and finishing out this year. So as Dylan mentioned, I founded DealForma after a decade of biopharma business development analysis in the industry, and I saw a need for a more modern database built for comprehensive business development and funding analysis. Today, I will start off by talking about the data through June 2021 coming from the database. We'll go through biopharma business development, partnerships in particular, venture and IPO fundraisers, M&A, and then we'll also include a segment on healthcare SPACs. Gilles will take us through how deals are getting signed, the all-important end handshake, if you will, and how a lot of deals are getting done nowadays digitally and also through Zoom and mediums like this. As I mentioned, the data that I'll be presenting today all come from the DealForma database. This is one of the newest biopharma databases covering more than a decade of deals, venture rounds, IPOs, and pipelines. Records are all manually curated by experienced analysts and presented in an easy-to-use interface so you can be confident you're getting the right data. DealForma is used by business developers and finance professionals at biotech, big pharma, and investment banks to benchmark the industry and run deal comparables analyses. You can find more information about DealForma and schedule your personalized demo at dealforma.com. So, without further ado, I'll jump right in. Here's a quick perspective over the last decade or so of deal making. Deal making in particular, for us, covers everything from R&D partnerships to academic licenses early on, and then M&A, asset purchases, and later on commercial deals. The big spike that you'll notice in 2020, that's primarily due to deals for coronavirus and SARS-CoV-2 in the early days. We've recorded about 1,000 deals specifically for that indication, either for diagnostics or tests or treatments and vaccines. That has quieted down a little bit as we've seen deals now for everything else. But that was a very interesting spike to see a lot of companies coming together quite rapidly and getting deals signed in a matter of weeks, when sometimes it would take months to get deals done. So as we focus down into the quarterly deal activity, here I'm showing activity across R&D and licensing partnerships, in particular between biopharma companies. And on a quarterly view, we are seeing a bit of a drop-off in the number of deals that are being signed in Q1 and Q2. And of course, likewise with that, the total deal values of those announced deals has dropped off a bit as well. The one reassuring bit is that the upfronts are totaling quite consistently with Q1, just a little bit up at $3 billion in total upfront cash that's paid across all partnership deals in biopharma. With the drop off in number of deals, we are seeing larger upfront deals, although there are fewer of them being signed nowadays. So it's kind of coming off of that crazy record that we saw in Q4 and through 2020, back down to deal making. So 215 deals came in just this last quarter. Here's a quick look at the top 5 deal makers as we shift the talk over to focus on the large pharmas. Merck leading the list at 18 deals signed in 2021 year to date, just over $2.3 billion in total announced deal value. That's followed by Lilly and Takeda with a large total deal value there of just over $6 billion in all-inclusive total deal amounts. So when are deals happening? In our database, we tend to look at, obviously, the therapy areas, the modalities and technologies, and the all-important stage at signing. And going back to 2008, when we were seeing only half of the deals in discovery and preclinical, now that's definitely up to close to 70%, 78% when you count in preclinical compounds being signed. Deals are being done earlier. Companies are coming in, and a lot of these deals are at larger valuations as well. $319 million in total upfront cash and equity. That's hard paid money in preclinical and discovery deals in 2021 year to date. So now if we look at some of the changes between 2-year periods in 2018 and 19 versus 20 and 21 year to date, it's no surprise that cancer as a therapy area leads the most active and the most valuable deal-making space. These 2 charts in particular, I focused down on in-licensing by big pharma. Okay, so this is coming in from other biotech companies into in particular the top 20 or so largest biopharma companies in the world. Looking at their deal activity, $8.5 billion in upfront cash and equity paid for cancer deals. That's up from $5.4 billion in the 2 years prior. A lot of that came from neurologic in the neuro space, where we actually saw a drop off in the amount of upfront funding coming in from 1.6 billion down to 770 million in total. Other areas that changed, I guess, quite significantly, you'll see cardiovascular dropping off and infectious disease ramping up. And that's not really counting COVID so much, because there weren't that many high dollar value deals for COVID in particular, but that's just infectious disease deals in general. Over on the right, we're looking at the modalities. So I've grouped together the biologics, mAbs, RNA, DNA, and proteins all into a big group. We've seen that jump up from 6.5 billion in total upfront cash and equity by big pharma to 7.7. A lot of that came from small molecules, although we saw that come up from roughly about 40% of deals down to about 20% of deals for small molecules. That also came from immunotherapy and gene therapy, surprisingly, deal upfronts coming down from there. Although with the latest developments in gene editing and all that were announced this week, I do think that there's going to be a return to the gene and genomics pretty soon. Now we turn our data over to venture. We do also cover venture investments from seed stage all the way up to series and IPOs. Venture is healthy, to say the least, into biotech companies. I always tell my friends it's a great time to be at a biotech company nowadays, especially a private one. And $6.3 billion in venture funding coming into biopharma therapeutics and platforms. That's topped off by Medtech, diagnostics, and other healthcare and life sciences companies. And that is definitely up there with Q1 of 2021 and blowing out the records that we were already building up in 2020. Still looking at venture, we're looking now at when the rounds are raised and at what stages of companies. We track this, of course, by stage of company as the high watermark, if you will, and platform and preclinical companies definitely bringing in the highest acceleration and amount of rounds going into companies at those early stages in the last couple of years. And that is coming out of investments in phase 1 and phase 2 companies in particular, and later ones. We do still see approved companies raise venture money, although it might be later rounds. Over on the right, now I've focused on seed and series A rounds in the last year and a half. Again, no surprise that cancer leads the space as the most active space for investment. However, neurologic at 1.17 billion in investment over the last year and a half is definitely right behind. It's interesting to note that the 1.7 invested in biotech companies in the neurologic space is actually larger than the 770 million or so that we saw in pharma to smaller biopharma upfronts. So more money coming in by investors than by big pharma and neurologic. Let's look at IPOs. So IPOs, same treatment. We're looking at the stages of companies when they go public. The green bars indicate 2021 year to date. First thing that's missing, which you'll notice if you look in the far ends, the left and right ends of these bars here, there were no platform or discovery IPOs in 2017, kind of when this big IPO window was really wide open. And nowadays there are no approved product or approved stage companies IPOing. A lot of that activity has shifted to earlier stages, much like we've seen in venture and in deal making. And a lot of what Gilles will be talking about today is also going to be looking at kind of that importance of early stage deal making as well. M&A, the exit. We are seeing M&A values return slowly. We were seeing a lot of deal drop off since Q4 and a lot of smaller deals being done to finish up the year. Now that has dropped off. What is absent, of course, are the mega mergers, the $74 billion deals and the $63 billion deals that we've seen in the years prior. I think the industry has some time to wind out from those acquisitions, and those are still a challenge to see coming across. We see them pop up on the charts, of course, and sometimes I have to asterisk them out because they present such outliers for large deals. But saying that, I think for 2021 and Q1 and Q2, we're seeing just a lot of smaller deals coming across now. Looking at when these deals are being signed for M&A, we've tracked, of course, the stages of companies when they were acquired. And again, looking at the most advanced stage of the company at time of acquisition, in 2008, that was 40% approved product companies, and now that's down to about 30%, sorry. And 50% of the companies being acquired are in clinical stages from phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And 22% of those are in discovery stages in the last 6 months, and a little bit more than that in 2020. So of course, we can't ignore SPACs. This chart updates quite rapidly. In fact, this data from last week, and we have added on a few more in the Q2 bar right there. $9.2 billion in IPO raises for SPAC companies. That's across roughly about 89 or 90 companies that have been formed specifically in the healthcare and biopharma space. 21 billion raised in 2020. And across all of these deals, we've seen out of the 89 or 90 SPACs that have been formed, we've seen about 46 companies now being reverse merged into a formerly private biotech or life science company to take that company public. So there's a delta there, and we do track when the SPACs were formed and that 2-year time gap that they have to find a target company. So there are still a lot of companies out there, roughly about $6 billion remaining in SPAC raises to go out. So now I'll turn it over to Gilles to talk about how deals are actually getting done.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Dylan. I think that Chris has clearly demonstrated that there's a real dynamism in the biopharma deal-making space right now. It's something that we've noticed too. Where our clients have been reporting that there's some increase in overall competition, and it's not only the fact that the deals are moving more and more early stage. So what I will discuss today is more what we're seeing about our pharma clients. So when I'm referring to our clients, I'll be more speaking from the large pharma than the biotech side, the ones that are generally speaking seeking to in-license assets. So some of the evolutions in deal making is clearly logistical. BD teams, for example, have adapted to the virtual meetings that the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns have forced onto them. But up the chain, due diligence and deal closing right through to signature are being done virtually too. And as Chris noted, SPACs and private equity firms are both impacting the dynamic, and there's plenty of competition to sign deals with the most promising biotechs. So you did refer to that, Chris, early on. It's a good time to be in a biotech with great science. The competition is not only coming from other pharma anymore, it's also coming clearly from VCs, from private investors, even public money flowing into the biopharma space. So long story short, we're in a context or at a moment where if you don't move fast, if you aren't the first to act, then you're behind. And there's a lot more competition going on than a couple of years ago. So in this changing world, the key to making deals is obviously to source and find the right assets before everyone else. And then it's moving fast once this asset is being found, moving fast into the deal execution. So in a nutshell, the key to success is efficiency. And when you look at a large pharma, we're talking about hundreds of people are being involved in the entire partnering process. and how you get those 100 people efficient to source the deal faster and execute the deal faster as well is crucial. So what we'll share now is that we recently surveyed a representative group of our pharma clients to look at specifically at efficiency, really from two angles. The first question we ask ourselves, and we ask this representative group of pharma, is how long it took them to sign a deal. And the second question we asked them is more qualitative, is where they thought that throughout the partnering process, they really had room for improvement. So if we look at the first dimension, the timeline and how long it takes to execute a deal, what really matters here is not so much the time it takes to source a deal, but more the time it takes to go from a CDA to a deal. And that time in average is 340 days. Due diligence was around 5 months. And assuming everything went well, it was less than 3 months from the end of due diligence through negotiation and to the kickoff of the new partnership. All up, if you include the pre-CDA activities, we're looking an average in 19 months to complete a deal. The second question was about room for improvement. So really the perception from the inside of a pharma company where the executive and the teams and the BD professionals thought they could be doing things better. And our clients reported that there were opportunities to improve efficiency at most points of the partnering process. However, it was clearly the pre-CDA period, the search for assets, the connecting and the triage of opportunities, where all of our respondents felt that was the greatest opportunity to do things more efficiently. And the challenge in this phase is not so much speed. I mean, it takes time to nurture a relationship, and you can't accelerate some things, which is initial discussion, getting to know each other, and that takes time, we all know that. The challenge is really not to miss out great opportunity, and more importantly, initiate a relationship before competition does. And clearly there, the fact that deal making is moving more and more early stage is making things more and more difficult. You need to find those stealth biotech or the spin out from tech transfer offices before competition does on a scientific landscape that is growing every day. So we completed this analysis, this time and efficiency analysis, by asking ourselves what are the financial benefit of being better at sourcing asset and being faster at executing deal. And I won't dive here into the details of the financial model we put together. We basically put together a sensitivity table based on risk-adjusted net present value by slightly evaluating the impact of changing the probability of success of the in-license assets and changing the number of deals that can be executed by the same team. The idea here is pretty simple. If the assets you source are better because you had more choice, you didn't miss out, you engage in a relationship before everyone else, ultimately, the outcome should be that the overall probability of success of the in-license asset is greater. And secondly, if you are faster or better or more efficient in your deal execution, you could clearly be making slightly more deals with the same team every year. So for a mid-sized pharma that would complete, let's say, 3 phase 1 deals a year, a slight change in probability of success and a slight change in the numbers of deals that your team can execute can rapidly turn into a $10 to $40 million annual value. So that's really the challenge here of being more efficient is clearly better sourcing again, and being much more efficient from CDA to deal in the execution phase. So if you'll excuse some self-promotion here, and I'd like to conclude with Inova. Addressing this efficiency, that's all Inova is about. Over the past 10 years, our platform has helped our clients source licensing opportunities earlier and help them execute deals quicker. Our vision of a digitalized partnering future is shared with our clients, but it's also shared with others, including market leaders, investors. And we felt it was time to accelerate and to take this digitalization one step further, with more data accessible through our platform, more online collaborations throughout the partnering process to include more internal colleagues, but also include and facilitate discussion with your third parties. So we will announce Thursday, 60 million euro equity investment in Inova by one of the largest private equity firm. That money is clearly here to help us further develop our products and make partnering in the biopharma industry more digital and more efficient. But I know my marketing team wouldn't want me to turn this webinar into an advertisement for our own deal. And so we're here to talk about the type of deals you guys are making. So maybe I can hand it back to Dylan and we can go to some questions.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gilles, and thanks, Chris, as well. We've already had a few questions come in. I'm going to encourage you in the audience to keep submitting those questions. We're going to try and get through as many as we can. We've already had a good half dozen already. But if you have questions, type them in that Q&A box and we'll get to as many as we can. The first was actually submitted very early on by Jason. And I think I'll direct this one to you, Chris. Jason was asking, what are the valuation trends for preclinical proof of concept cell therapy companies, in particular in orphan diseases and breakthrough therapies? Can you talk a bit to those valuation trends?
Sure. We did see an increase overall in cell therapies as a modality for deal making. And in particular in rare diseases, rare and orphan diseases, we are seeing a ramp up in that as well. We have a number of large pharma companies that typically were not in that space before, not in orphan diseases, that are coming into very early stage, very technical cell therapies, and in rare diseases as well. So we're getting that upward pressure in the number of deals and also the upfront cash and equity that's being paid for early stage deal making in rare and orphan, in particular in cell therapy that's driven across T cell and CAR T therapies and natural killer cells and such. And so we're seeing a ramp up in that.
Perfect, thanks, Chris. Chris, this might be another one your way as well from Himanshu. You mentioned that uptick in deals during the COVID period with regards to COVID. Can you speak to anything with regards to the segmentation of the data there by vaccine or by type?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tremendous effort from all biotech and pharma companies in 2020. We've logged just over 1,000 deals in particular for that indication, whether it's for SARS-CoV-2 or for COVID, just 1,027 deals. That's through 2020 and through June of this year. The split, if we look at that, it's 277 deals for vaccines, 340 deals for therapies, and the rest, about 410 deals there for diagnostics and tests and other kind of deals around that. So it's I would say it's an even split between vaccines and therapies, with the rest coming in for diagnostics and COVID. It's definitely interesting to watch all of the companies that got together and did deals quite rapidly to get things done and advance therapies and got us where we are right now.
Great. Chris, a question from Sybil. Is there also any analysis on regional deals or breaking things down regionally or breaking down deals with royalties?
Yeah, we do look at deals regionally, both where the licensing territories are and also where the companies are headquartered when deals are being done. So, for example, in the headquarter directionality there that we look at quite often, deals originating from US-based companies out to companies in Europe or in Asia, and in particular in China. Or if it's for the licensing territories themselves, companies anywhere doing licensing deals for the territories of interest for themselves. We're seeing a trend kind of continuing towards deal making into China with a number of larger and now substantial Chinese companies in licensing compounds from US-based companies. Beijing announcing deals recently and some development there, and a number of them. We've run a couple of reports looking at that, and not just deal making, but investments cross-border as well. And in regards to the royalty side of things, we are seeing kind of stable royalties. Typically for the first 5 or 6 years of a deal, all you really know is that it's a high single-digit, low double-digit royalty. I'm still trying to pin down exactly what number that is. It's probably like 9 or 10, but we're not seeing much changes there. Regarding territorial splits, both on the royalty and profit split side, that still continues to happen. So it's interesting to see that and track it as well.
Great. Laurie asks, how do we explain this fall in investment during the second part of 2021, I guess, compared to that first quarter?
I think it just has to do with expectations and valuations. It was definitely I don't know what you'd call it, but quite heated in terms of money coming in. So now it's really just a matter of seeing what companies will do with that influx of funding. How will they develop products going forward, and how far will they go? Whereas typically you haven't seen biotech companies take products further in development all on their own. Typically you'd see a larger biotech or a pharma company engage sooner. We are seeing that difficulty and that challenge really in deal making. And as Gilles mentioned as well, that is, the influx of venture capital money is actually presenting a challenge to some of the larger pharmas, because now they're seeing that as a competitive factor against their deal making. It has dropped off a bit. I think it's just a little bit of a cooling off to see where things are going. But the data that I presented was from last week, and we're still seeing some large rounds coming in this week as well. It's interesting to see deals across all biopharma development, not just in drugs and therapeutics, but in silico last week, raising a $255 million Series C round. Definitely eye-opening there for investments coming into AI and machine learning.
Gilles, I have a question for you from Ahmed. He asks, how does Inova actually accelerate the deal making? Can you give a little bit of detail on that part?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's several touch points where digital technology can really help accelerate. First of all, I mean, if you look from the pharma perspective, you need to focus your teams on dedicated therapeutic areas or modalities. And often what we find out when you look at search and evaluate teams is that this roadmap is not always clearly communicated, and you end up having several people searching and looking at different potential partners, and at the end of the day doing duplicates. So having a system in place where you have your need briefs, so your strategy that is clearly communicated, and all the leads that are being shared among all the Scots, part-time Scots, SNE and BD, basically all the folks that end up being touch point with external parties, brings focus, alignment, and better execution. The other part where we play a role is in facilitating matching, where we work hands in hands with Bio, and Bio organize some of the largest partnering event with a digital platform that helps, called Bio One-on-One, that helps organize one-to-one meetings during the Bio Digital Conference, and some of you might just attended, but also during the Bio GPM that now is close to be one of the largest side event of the week of JP Morgan. The other way we facilitate matching is more and more by embedding data in our platform. And so that's an area where a lot of the funding we're receiving is going. So we've been investing in AI a lot. And now we have more and more interesting data technology on identifying early stage biotech, because we think that's an area where the current data offering or have some weakness, and where we can complement the likes of Clarivet or Evaluate Pharma or other vendors in this space. And once you get into deal execution, so once you have a CD in place, if you, again, looking from the pharma perspective, want to go from your CDA to a deal faster than competition and maybe do your due diligence not in 5 months, but do it in 3 months, it's project management mode. And again, a digital platform will share information, put everyone in a process, align on goals, next steps, milestones, create reporting to the management, so you can ensure that you keep the dynamic and you get things rolling and you don't fall into pitfalls that delays the deal making.
Great. Chris, I've got another question for you from Matthew. Your survey suggested it takes about 8 months to go from initial search up to CDA. Do you think that can actually get faster, or will it just get better, more efficient?
You said Chris, was the question to Chris?
Gilles. No, sorry, for Gilles, sorry.
I absolutely, I think it can go faster, and we have some VP BD or senior VP that actually have very ambitious objective of shortening this phase, because they've lost deals by just taking an extra month or being slower than the competition. And so they've given themselves objectives that are far below 8 months. And some of them are on track to reach out. And again, it's a good combination of management rules and monitoring, reporting to the management, and good information tracking and sharing.
Chris, we've got a question from Himanshu about, I guess, the logistics of DealForma. How frequently does data get updated in your database?
Oh yeah, thanks. We track daily activity. So roughly within 24 hours or so, deals that are announced are in the platform. They're quality checked. That's usually what keeps deals back a little bit, because we want to double check everything that goes up there. Because ultimately that means that you don't have to double check your work when you're doing actual analysis. And deals coming in from typically from press releases and other sources. We manually create those, and we also fold in a lot of news from the news partners that we work with. There's a group called Pharma Shots that pulls in kind of nicely concise bulleted form information from clinical trials and approvals and such to round out the pipeline offerings. And our analysts, thankfully, they're doing a great job of covering all the deal activity and all the funding and company and pipeline activity in the database. So just to answer your question, roughly about 24 hours. If it's a major deal, it's usually the same day in the database.
Thanks. Maybe this is more suited to you, Chris, but Gilles, if you want to jump in, you can as well. What are the sort of trends and the impact of the role that investment bankers are having on M&A and fundraising, I guess the biopharma space more generally? What can we say their real impact is?
I'll touch on that a little bit, and Gilles could jump in as well. I'm pretty sure you're seeing that too. Investment banks are definitely paying a lot closer attention to earlier stage companies, both as M&A targets and as potential clients long term. They're getting in not just for M&A, but also for fundraising. So we're seeing that in the conversations that we have with a number of banks as well, in terms of how we help them with data. So moving earlier stage there as well. They are helping companies. In terms of deals being signed, like I said, there's more deals being signed, sometimes at smaller values, but definitely getting in there to get kind of the long-term effect in there.
I think, there are two different trends that are in some way competing. VCs have always been a bridge between very early stage biotech and the licensing deal with the pharma from a biotech perspective. And actually, all the BD of the pharma company works hands in hands with the VC, and that's where they source many of their deals. And that's in addition to events and data, VC is the other third pillar of sourcing for potential and future partners. But what we are observing recently is that as the VCs have more and more money, they're financing more and more later stage. And so biotechs now have an option to go into phase 2, phase 3 with VC money, while before there was only the out licensing option to a large pharma. So VCs who were previously really partners of the large pharma company are more and more becoming in some area competitors. And so that's what we discussed before, and that raises the need for even more efficiency.
Gilles, a question from Celine, who said that you touched on the benefits of pharma of Inova. What would be an advantage of Inova for biotech?
That's an excellent question. I mean, clearly Inova has primarily a large pharma background with 60% of the top 100 pharma company working with us, and that makes sense. I mean, the larger the team is, the more you need digital technology to align everyone and share information. Nevertheless, we have over 80 biotechs that are using Inova as well, either because they get to a size where they already have a team that justify having a platform to share information across the team and with other parties within the company, or because they're looking for guidelines and template and a bit of structure on how to manage their out licensing process. And that's an area where we're going to be investing a lot in the future. And we actually have a program to develop a dedicated solution to biotechs to provide a tool that not only help them showcase, enter in contact with potential business developer in the large pharma company, but also find some deal-making tools with some template, with some guidelines that would be dedicated specifically to biotechs.
Great. Chris, this is a more general question, so let me know if we can't answer it, but it's from Gilles, who says, essentially for a big pharma company, they've scouted, they've found a startup that seems amazing, they have some great science. How do they evaluate that partnership if they don't have internal expertise? Are they using outside groups? Are they using outside expertise, bringing in consultants? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, and we definitely help with companies in that situation as well, both on a data and a service perspective. They do source specialists in either therapy areas or modalities that they're not specialized in, or in specific deal types when they call on investment bankers and data folks. We typically see companies lean on what data has been presented in a particular space, what other companies might be developing in that area as well, and in particular in the pipelines. We get called on to scan through what other companies and other products are being developed by by target or mechanism of action to lay out that competitive picture. So it's really a good mix of competitive intelligence in the classic sense, market analysis, and also to see what's there in terms of due diligence from other deals that their potential target partner has been doing or what they've been doing.
Lee asks, can you flesh out at all the dynamics of the neurospace, maybe with regards to gene therapy?
Oh yeah, sure. Neuro is definitely, it's still there. We saw the drop off in gene therapy from 2018 to 2019 and into 2020. I think a lot of that is being taken up by other modalities, but we still see a lot of deals being done there. In particular, you saw a large deal. AbbVie signed a deal with Capsida, 90 million upfront cash and equity for a number of CNS diseases. That was for 3 gene therapies being developed there. We still see large deals being done. In 2020, we saw the deal between Sangamo and Novartis for their zinc finger technology there in gene regulatory. So the deals are still being done. In terms of the mix between rare CNS diseases and the more classical, the larger ones, it's kind of an even mix between about 50-50 between rare disease and the larger ones like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Although I would tend to say that there are more deals being done for the larger indications at this point. And definitely in terms of the number of deals and also the upfronts that are being spent on that. It's definitely a hot area. It's just in relative to other developments, other therapy areas, we just haven't seen the acceleration there, but things could change. So, yeah.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions here from Mayank and Tim and Julian, just in an effort to try and pull a couple of threads together. But is there a point where a biotech doing a deal with a pharma company is going to be stopped from doing deals with other pharma companies? Are their licenses getting more and more restrictive, or are we seeing biotechs do multiple deals with multiple companies for multiple indications, for example?
In terms of the exclusivities that we're seeing, I think most of them are still very much exclusive deals. If there's any split between the same asset, it's really across different indications or sometimes different therapy areas altogether. One of the main goals of classical biotech business development is to leave your uncapped upside, and definitely investors that are putting in these higher values want to see that as well. So companies are being very cautious not to license out everything, and keep some development, some potential for themselves for in-house development. So a lot of the deal making and of course the investment money is fueling their own internal development pipelines. In terms of splitting it between different companies, when it really comes down to the same asset, we're seeing splits across, like I mentioned, indications, lists of targets. So targets that are licensed out to one partner, licensed out to another, possibly options to add on more within each of those, but then also keeping things close to in-house as well. So indications and targets, territory splits are always there, although we don't see that very much in early stages. It's typically for the worldwide territory. But as we get into later stage deals like phase 2s and phase 3s, that's when you typically see deals that are being signed for different regions, again, for the same asset.
There was a question there about one of the graphs that you put up, again from Julian, who's asking, Merck has done about twice as many deals so far in 2021 as the next biggest player, which he said was Lilly, but their total deal volume is actually quite a bit less than Lilly, about 2/3. What's going on? What's going on at Merck?
That's a big question. What's going on at Merck? I mean, we are seeing more deals. They're twice the number of deals. So 18 deals came in just 2021. Lilly signing 9 deals. I think a lot of those deals are definitely larger individually in terms of the total deal values. We haven't broken out the upfront cash that was paid for each of these. Of course, that's subject to disclosure, but we're seeing roughly about equal amount of upfront cash being paid. So in one sense, larger deals, fewer of them, but a lot more in terms of milestones and such on that side of the deal, whereas a lot more front-loaded and kind of initially paid deals in the Merck setting. So,
Gilles, a question for you. From the partnering technology side, has there been any reduction in the number of partnering meetings that people are having because of COVID and the lockdowns?
There's clearly some fatigue. I mean, I guess your question is referring to partnering events. Is that correct, Dylan?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I think there's clearly some fatigue with digital conferences and digital meetings, and the vast majority of the BD community, even if they enjoy the stay at home and not flying the 360 days a year, they want to go back to in-person meeting. And so that has reflected on the numbers of specifically the small virtual events. But events like biodigital, the numbers of meetings taking place there is clearly a bit lower than the in-person, but it's still pretty high. And I think the large event have demonstrated that they kept their attractivity despite going virtual. But clearly some of the smaller ones have been impacted.
Chris, can you add to that maybe? Has there been any impact then on the deals that get done, or have people just found a way to move through the lack of in-person events and just adapt to this new reality?
I think as soon as we started hearing of things opening up, both in terms of travel and physical, restaurant locations, the number of business developers that I talk to, a lot of them are saying, look, we just can't wait to get face-to-face, at least to the end stage of the deal, to hammer out the last few remaining points and get that deal closed. There's just so much more that you could do in person than you can in a very prescribed, formatted, has to fit on your screen type of conversation. So we might be seeing a lot of deals being initiated and a lot of the initial work being done digitally, but there's just nothing that replaces that final meeting, or maybe the final 2 meetings in person. And so there's definitely a need for that. I mean, just as Gilles pointed out, is Zoom fatigue and kind of teleconference fatigue, if you will. We want to get back to that. And I think I started seeing some indications of JPM 2022 being talked about now. So that's people are itching to get into in-person meetings, I think.
I actually wanted to add one point about JPM 2022 coming up. As you know, most of the large pharma are using our platform to schedule their own meeting in a more private way than during a conference during JP Morgan. And clearly what they have indicated in the vast majority of those large pharma is they are going back physically to JP Morgan, but not like they used to. The number of people that will be sending there will be much lower. I would anticipate 30% maximum of what it used to be, and the rest will stay at home. And so we're moving into an era where those events are going to be hybrid, where a portion of the people, the BD folks, will be on site, with the rest will stay at home.
We've got time just for probably 1 or 2 more questions. I have got one from Diane, who asks, what is the trend in terms of interest, licensing interest in preclinical, so with a large pipeline potential, versus clinical data? Can you speak to the trend there?
Yeah, in terms of preclinical, I had a chart in the deck looking at the drive towards earlier stage deal making, and looking at not just the number of deals, but also the upfront payments that are being paid for preclinical and even earlier stage deals in discovery. That has gone up. We've looked at that and year by year, basically in terms of the upfront cash and equity that's being signed. Whereas typically you'd see more of the larger upfronts being signed at phase 2, at proof of concept. Now we're definitely seeing a lot more of those in preclinical and earlier stages, as companies are just they're finding value and they're going in earlier and earlier to kind of take control of more of that pipeline and more of that potential. So upfronts are going up for preclinicals. That also means that the number of potential milestones until you get to approval would go up. You also see the number of backup compounds and backup sets of milestones with those going up as well. So again, higher values for earlier stage deals and more of them too. So as competition's heating up for earlier stages.
Perfect. And I'll just go to this one last question now. Again for you, Chris. If someone subscribes to DealForma, do they only get data, or is there some system in place where they get alerts and news related to a particular interest?
Yeah, we work with partner companies in both of our own development as well. You could set up screens and searches for the types of deals you want to look for. So let's say you're specializing in rare gene therapies, and you want to see all the deals that are happening there. You can get the 10 years of history and drill down into what was being done there. And also you could set up alerts, both in terms of new deals being done and news being announced and being digested from our information partners around there. I mentioned, Pharma Shots is one of them. We also work with a number of others that are putting out, really valid, high quality content, very timely and concise, I think. So that's definitely there. It's definitely a good tool to use for kind of historical analysis, but also to stay up to date with what's happening and really what's leading you into the deals that are being done. Because as Gilles mentioned, it's all about jumping on something sooner. Days and weeks cost money, obviously. So getting into a deal, especially when it's competitive.
Yeah, and I guess, Gilles, to add to that, you would see more and more interest in the pharma clients you talk to, as well as the biotechs, in getting access to data, good data, earlier and earlier, right?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, absolutely. I think data is clearly one of the key sources for finding future partners. Now, when you look at pipeline data, they've always been very good for clinical stage assets. And as things are moving more and more early stage, it gets more complicated. And so there's clearly a challenge here that needs to be addressed on how you bridge the gap between an interest for more preclinical assets, even sometimes finding in the academic space the ones who are working on a specific modality or indication. And that's where we've decided to invest our resources because that can be addressed with a lot of AI technology, but not only. But clearly there's a need for more data fuel platform.
That's great. Well, gentlemen, as you can see, we're coming up on time. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you both, to Chris of DealForma. Of course, you can find Chris and the team at DealForma.com, and to Gilles here at Inova. You can visit us at inova.io. And of course, thank you to everyone for attending this afternoon, this morning as well. A couple of final notes. If you keep your eye on your email inbox tomorrow, you should receive a link to review the video of the webinar. And as always, you should feel free to share that link with your colleagues who might be interested in the content but weren't able to be here on the call today. As well, because we know a lot of you have spent the last couple of weeks preparing for, attending and following up on partnering meetings at BioDigital, it's quite possible you've missed out on some of the very interesting panels that were held at BioDigital. But don't worry, we've got you covered here at Inova, and we've attended, reviewed, summarized some of the best panels there of the week. And we'll send you the link to that when we send out the webinar link as well. And finally, just a reminder from me to please don't forget to complete the survey that pops up when you exit the webinar. Your feedback is really valuable. And of course, if you'd like to participate as a panelist on a future webinar, you can let us know in the survey as well. Thanks for your attendance, and we'll be in contact very, very soon. Bye-bye.